Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Charleston, a historic city with oak-lined streets and red brick buildings, exuded an atmosphere of Sunday calm. Yet this morning in the chic downtown district, an unexpected event would disrupt the tranquil order. Caroline Johnson, a black woman in her 40s, elegant but humble, pushed open the glass door of the café The Golden Brew. She had chosen this place for its reputation for fine pastries and carefully prepared coffees. The walls, adorned with modern paintings, and the polished copper light fixtures gave the place a refined look. Caroline walked up to the counter, a polite smile on her face, ready to order her usual espresso. But the moment she placed her hand on the counter, the server, Ethan Reynolds, a young, arrogant-looking white man, looked at her with immediate contempt. "Sorry, we don't serve those kinds of customers here," he said icily, before turning his back and serving another customer without another word. Caroline's eyes widened in shock. Silence fell over the café, a few customers looking at her in shock and unease. Her heart pounded, but she remained calm. The pride and dignity that had always guided her refused to give way to anger or panic. What Caroline didn't know was that the café wasn't just another place. It belonged to her son, Marcus Johnson, a brilliant young entrepreneur who had transformed the small family café into a trendy city institution. Marcus was a few feet away, watching from the entrance, ready to intervene but letting the situation unfold for a moment to appreciate the gravity of his mother's humiliation. That morning, a simple café would become the scene of a lesson in dignity, respect, and unexpected power, where the arrogance of a young waiter would meet the fearlessness of a mother and the discreet but firm authority of her son. Caroline walked slowly towards the counter of the Golden Brew, her leather bag draped delicately over her shoulder. She held her head high, her polite smile like armor against the invisible wall of prejudice that would soon rise before her. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and warm croissants hung in the air, contrasting cruelly with the sudden coldness of the waiter, Ethan Reynolds. "Hello, I would like an espresso, please," Caroline said in a soft but confident voice. Ethan stared at her for a moment, a contemptuous sneer on his lips. Then, in a dry, categorical tone, he replied, "Sorry, we don't serve those kinds of customers here." A silence fell over the café. The customers stopped whispering, some turning to Caroline with visible incomprehension. Her cheeks flushed, but she refused to let anger take over. Her hand clenched the bag, and she took a deep breath. "Excuse me," she said, surprised, hoping that this mistake would be corrected. But Ethan shook his head, as if he had pronounced an irrevocable sentence. "I'm not arguing. Get out." Caroline took a step back, her heart clenched in humiliation. Murmurs erupted around her, some customers whispering disapproval at the waiter, others remaining silent, too intimidated to intervene. She felt a mixture of anger and sadness rise within her. How could anyone judge a person by their appearance in a place that was supposed to be welcoming? She turned on her heel, ready to leave, but her gaze met that of a man who had just entered the café. Marcus Johnson. Her son. Young and charismatic, he had just observed the scene from the entrance and immediately understood what had just happened. Anger rose within him like a wave. He knew the person being humiliated was his mother, and he would never tolerate being treated like this. Caroline, unknowingly, had just triggered a confrontation that would quickly reveal the truth and reverse the power between her and the arrogant waiter. Caroline left the café, her heart heavy and her mind racing. The rays of the morning sun seemed crueler than ever, illuminating the cobblestones of the street as if to accentuate her humiliation. Every step she took resonated in her chest, an echo of wounded pride and trampled dignity. She paused for a moment on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath to calm the anger and frustration that threatened to overwhelm her. How could he, she whispered to herself, the words almost unreal. She remembered her years of work, her sacrifices raising her son alone, and everything she'd endured to give him a better future. And now, here was an arrogant young waiter who had just treated her like she was worthless. Around her, the city continued its morning routine. People walked in a hurry, some looking at their phones, others absent-mindedly waving to passers-by. But for Caroline, time seemed to stand still, every glance on the street a reminder of the humiliation she had just suffered. She wondered if she had done something wrong, if her appearance or skin color could justify this unfair treatment. She recalled the principles she had instilled in Marcus from a young age: self-respect, courage, and dignity, no matter the circumstances. And yet, she felt powerless in the face of this situation. A persistent question swirled in her mind: why me? As she turned the corner, ready to forget about the cafe and get on with her day, a figure caught her eye. A man had just entered the Golden Brew, observing the scene with an intensity that made Caroline's heart beat faster. She didn't yet know that this man was Marcus, her son, and that his presence would soon transform this humiliation into a lesson in justice and unexpected power. Fate seemed to be playing out before her eyes, ready to turn the tables and reveal truths that neither Caroline nor the waiter had yet imagined. Marcus Johnson walks through the door of the Golden Brew with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly what they own and how they should act. By 28, he had transformed the family coffee shop into a citywide chain, with a keen eye for style, detail, and human connection. But today, his heart was beating for another reason. His mother, Caroline, had just been humiliated in front of everyone. He watched the scene from the entrance. Caroline, head held high despite her humiliation, was leaving the counter after Ethan Reynolds's curt and arrogant refusal. The customers murmured among themselves, some with discomfort, others with curiosity, but none seemed to want to intervene. Marcus felt a silent anger rise within him, cold and sharp. He stepped forward, measuring each step, letting the waiter realize that someone was watching. Ethan, focused on his work, didn't immediately notice the young man approaching. Marcus took a moment to assess the situation: Caroline's posture, the waiter's sneer, and the looks on the faces of the customers. He knew that how he intervened would make all the difference. Marcus chose the strategy of observation before action. He wanted to see how the waiter would behave, how far his arrogance would go, before revealing the authority he possessed. He stood back for a moment, silent, hands in his pockets, a slight frown on his face. Then, calmly, he walked towards the counter and spoke in a firm but measured voice. "Excuse me, Ethan. I think you misjudged the situation." Ethan looked up, surprised, and met Marcus's determined gaze. An immediate sense of discomfort washed over the waiter. He didn't yet know that this man was the owner of the cafe, but he instinctively felt that his arrogance would soon reach its limits. Caroline, for her part, remained motionless, intrigued and slightly relieved to see someone intervene. She still didn't know that the one who had just spoken was her son. The situation, tense and delicate, was about to tip over. Marcus knew better than to act in anger. His mother deserved a respectful but firm intervention that would turn this humiliation into a public lesson. And while the waiter hesitated, unable to find the right words, Marcus smiled to himself. The confrontation was about to begin, and the outcome would surprise everyone in the cafe. Ethan Reynolds felt a cold sweat trickle down the back of his neck. He didn't like being spoken to in that tone, firm, calm, but imbued with an authority he couldn't ignore. Marcus Johnson stood before him, his eyes fixed on him, and for the first time, Ethan felt vulnerable. He stammered. I'm just doing my job." Marcus didn't flinch. Her piercing gaze seemed to read right through him, scrutinizing not only his arrogance, but also his complete ignorance of the situation. Ethan began to feel the weight of his actions. Humiliating a customer was bad enough, but what he didn't know was that this woman wasn't just any customer, she was the owner's mother. The customers in the cafe had begun to notice the change in the atmosphere. Some exchanged puzzled glances, whispering in hushed tones. The air was thick with tension, and Ethan felt everyone's gaze on him like a silent judgment. His pride was beginning to waver. Caroline, meanwhile, watched the scene with a mixture of curiosity and concern. She didn't yet know that Marcus was behind all this, but she felt something was about to change. She felt a wave of relief mixed with subtle anticipation. Marcus took a step forward, further closing the space between them. "Do you realize, Ethan, that your behavior is unacceptable?" Ethan shook his head, unable to answer. The words seemed to have evaporated from his mouth, replaced by a growing panic. The arrogance that had led him to humiliate Caroline crumbled under the weight of Marcus's calm but implacable gaze. A murmur ran through the cafe. Some customers whispered words of approval, others seemed eager to see how the situation would resolve itself. Ethan felt everyone's attention now focused on him. For the first time, he understood that he had crossed the line and that power was changing hands. In this charged silence, Marcus added, in a soft but authoritative voice. "This lady deserves respect, and you are going to apologize to her, here, in front of everyone." Ethan blanched, his shock leaving him almost immobile. He still hadn't grasped the magnitude of his situation. His arrogance had just collided with a truth he could no longer ignore: Caroline wasn't just anyone, and Marcus wasn't just any son. The tension mounted, each second stretching like an eternity. The moment of truth was approaching, and Ethan knew that no matter what his next word was, there would be no going back. Marcus took another step closer, closing the distance between himself and Ethan. His gaze was calm, but every word he spoke carried the weight of authority and justice. "Ethan, I think you're making a serious mistake." His voice was calm but firm, echoing through the silent cafe. The customers held their breath, aware that the situation had just reached a turning point. Ethan, nervous and unsettled, tried to answer. I don't understand." Marcus left no room for the awkward excuse. With a subtle gesture, he pointed at Caroline, who stood there, motionless, her bag clutched to her. "This lady deserves respect. You are treating her with contempt and arrogance, and this behavior is completely unacceptable." The waiter stammered, unable to formulate a defense. Marcus smiled slightly, knowing that the time had come to reveal the truth. His voice then took on a softer, but implacable tone. "And just so you understand, Ethan, this lady isn't just any customer. She's my mother." Shock hit Ethan like lightning. His eyes widened, his jaw tensed. All his previous arrogance crumbled in a split second. The silence in the cafe became deafening, every customer staring at the server with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Caroline, incredulous, felt a mixture of relief and pride rise within her. She had always raised Marcus with values of dignity, courage, and respect, and seeing him intervene like this, for her, filled her with emotion. Marcus continues. "You will apologize, here and now, in front of all your customers. You will acknowledge your mistake and understand that respect is not an option, it is a requirement." Ethan, trembling, stammered. I'm sorry, so sorry." The customers' murmur turned into a mixture of satisfaction and approval. Some clapped softly, others nodded in admiration of Marcus's dignity and authority. Caroline, her heart still pounding, placed a hand on her son's shoulder, grateful but proud. She knew this moment would remain etched in her memory and in the memories of all who had witnessed it. The situation, which had begun with humiliation and contempt, had now transformed into a lesson in respect, power, and justice. Marcus had taken control, and the arrogant waiter had just received a lesson he would never forget. The silence in the Golden Brew was almost palpable. The customers, who had until then been passive witnesses to Caroline's humiliation, were now faced with a scene none of them could have imagined. The shock on Ethan Reynolds's face was the first evidence of the impact of the revelation. He had just realized that he had just humiliated not only a customer, but the mother of the cafe owner. Caroline, still standing straight, felt a mixture of surprise and pride rise within her. Her eyes fell on Marcus, who calmly held the waiter's gaze with quiet authority. She realized how much her son had grown, not only in stature, but in his ability to handle delicate situations with intelligence and firmness. The murmurs in the cafe grew louder. Some customers exchanged stunned glances. "Is this his mother? Oh my God, that waiter is going to regret what he did." Ethan, unable to find the words, stammered out a clumsy apology. Every movement he made seemed to betray his panic and shame. His hands trembled slightly, and he avoided Caroline's gaze, as if his arrogance had been replaced by a sudden, overwhelming fear. Marcus took another step forward, reinforcing the effect of his silent authority. His voice was calm but firm. "Do you understand now, Ethan, that respect is not something you negotiate? The waiter nodded, unable to respond except with a whisper. Yes. I understand. I'm sorry. Caroline, for her part, let a small smile form on her lips. She had been humiliated only minutes earlier, but now the balance of power had tipped. Her son had turned the humiliation into a public lesson in dignity and justice. The customers, now fully aware of the truth, applauded softly, some even enthusiastically. The atmosphere, once heavy and tense, transformed into a mixture of admiration and respect for Caroline and Marcus. For Ethan, that moment was etched in his memory, an unexpected and painful lesson about arrogance, dignity, and respect. He understood that he had underestimated the power of a mother and her son, and that his actions, even the smallest, could have far-reaching consequences. Caroline and Marcus exchanged a look, a mixture of complicity and pride. The revelation wasn't just for Ethan and the customers, it was also a reminder to Caroline that, even in the face of injustice, her dignity and that of her family were unshakable. The murmur of the customers gradually quieted, giving way to an atmosphere of respect and reflection. Marcus, aware that the situation had to be resolved once and for all, took a breath and addressed the entire cafe, his clear voice carrying beyond the counter. What you just saw is not simply a service error. It is an example of what happens when you confuse arrogance with authority. The customers, surprised by this speech, fell completely silent. Even Ethan, still frozen, felt the weight of the words. Marcus continued. A person's dignity is not measured by their appearance, their status, or their role in our society. Caroline, my mother, embodies this dignity. She raised a family with courage and respect. And yet, she was humiliated today by completely unacceptable behavior. Caroline, moved, felt a gentle warmth invade her. Her son's gaze was filled with pride, not for himself, but for her. She understood that this humiliation would turn into a moment of power and teaching for all present. Marcus turned to Ethan. You will apologize, and you will understand that every little bit helps. Arrogance can destroy trust, but respect can transform a situation. Ethan, his eyes lowered, stammered. I'm sorry, madam. Caroline, with calm and commanding dignity, nodded. She accepted the apology, but never wavered from her position. Thank you, but remember, respect is never optional. Marcus then turned to the customers, smiling slightly. The important thing is not only that justice was done today, but that we all understand that every person deserves to be treated with respect. Whether in this cafe or anywhere else, dignity must never be violated. A small applause erupted from the room, then turned into a silence filled with gratitude and reflection. Ethan, still flushed with shame, bowed his head and knew he had learned a lesson he would never forget. Caroline placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, and their eyes met. A silent message passed between them. They had transformed a moment of humiliation into a public lesson in dignity and justice. In the Golden Brew, that day, respect had triumphed, and the lesson would remain engraved in memories. A few days after the incident, Marcus decided it was time to turn this humiliation into a symbol of respect and recognition. He organized a small event at his cafe, inviting some loyal customers and members of the local community. The goal was not only to celebrate the cafe's success, but also to highlight Caroline's integrity, dignity, and courage. On the morning of the event, Caroline entered the cafe dressed elegantly but simply, radiating confidence. The customers present, having heard about the incident, waited with curiosity and a certain silent respect. Marcus approached the microphone placed in the center of the cafe. Today we want to celebrate someone who embodies the true value of this coffee, and who reminds us all of the importance of respect and dignity. Caroline, surprised and moved, felt all eyes on her. She understood that Marcus had orchestrated this initiative not to humiliate her, but to pay homage to her. Marcus continues. Caroline Johnson is not only my mother, she is an inspiration to us all. Her courage, patience, and dignity in the face of injustice teach us that respect is more powerful than anger, and that true strength lies in how we treat others. Ethan Reynolds, unwillingly present, stood aside. His expression betrayed a combination of embarrassment and reflection. He understood that this lesson went far beyond a simple incident. It represented a permanent reminder of the value of every individual. Caroline spoke in turn, her voice calm but clear. "Thank you, Marcus. And thank you all for being here to understand that every action, every word matters. Respect is never negotiable, and dignity must always prevail." The customers applauded warmly. Even Ethan, unable to look away, felt the lesson sink in. He knew he had been cleverly and subtly put in his place, and that he still had much to learn. Marcus, satisfied, turned to his mother with a knowing smile. "See, Mom? It wasn't just a lesson for him, but for everyone." Caroline smiled, feeling the situation had been completely turned around. The initial humiliation had transformed into a moment of power and recognition. In the Golden Brew, that day, arrogance had been replaced by respect, and the lesson in dignity had marked the minds of all those present. After Marcus's orchestrated event, Caroline Johnson's reputation changed dramatically. Customers, who had previously known her only as a visitor, began to speak of her with respect and admiration. Her dignity in the face of humiliation, her patience, and her ability to turn a painful situation into a public lesson inspired the entire community. The local media, having heard about the incident and the events at the cafe, came to interview Caroline and Marcus. Articles were published, praising Caroline's courage and elegance, as well as Marcus's maturity and sense of justice. In each article, his name was associated with values of strength, resilience, and respect. Caroline, usually discreet, found herself thrust into the spotlight. But she remained humble, refusing to accept any personal glory. What mattered to her was the message it conveyed: dignity and respect are not negotiable, and everyone deserves to be treated fairly. At the cafe, customers now came not only for the coffee, but also to meet Caroline, listen to her advice and be inspired by her experience. She became a key figure, a woman whose quiet strength and natural charisma made the Golden Brew. Even Ethan Reynolds, who continued to work in the cafe, had changed. He had become more humble, aware that arrogance had no place in an environment where everyone's dignity must be protected. Every interaction he now had with Caroline was imbued with respect and courtesy, a reflection of the lesson he had learned. Marcus, watching his mother evolve into this new role, felt immense pride. Not only had he defended his mother, but he had also helped transform her initial humiliation into an opportunity for greatness and recognition. Caroline was no longer just the woman he deeply respected, she had become a living symbol of resilience and dignity for the entire community. On the streets of Charleston, Caroline Johnson's name now resonated as that of a strong and respected woman, capable of transforming every obstacle into a life lesson. The humiliation had been overcome, and Caroline's elevation marked a turning point, not only for her, but for all who had witnessed her courage and greatness. Weeks passed, and the Golden Brew returned to its usual routine, but something had changed in the air. The dynamics of the cafe, once simply businesslike, were now marked by respect, dignity, and admiration. Caroline and Marcus worked side by side, not only to run the cafe, but to convey a message: every person deserves to be treated with humanity and consideration. Ethan Reynolds, the server who had caused the initial humiliation, had completely changed. His misplaced pride had been replaced by humility. Every interaction with Caroline or any other customer was now guided by respect and courtesy. The lesson he had learned that day resonated in his every action, and he began to earn, little by little, the sincere respect of his colleagues and customers. Caroline, meanwhile, thrived in her new role as a respected and inspiring figure. Customers came not only for the coffee, but also to hear her advice and listen to her stories. Every smile, every kind word she offered, reinforced her reputation and strengthened the bond between her, Marcus, and the community. One morning, as the sun rose over Charleston, Caroline entered the cafe with the calm and confidence of a woman who had overcome injustice. Marcus followed her, his eyes shining with pride. Together, they welcomed the first customers of the day, transforming every gesture into an act of respect and dignity. The humiliating past now seemed far behind it. The lesson learned by Ethan and witnessed by all the customers had paved the way for a more just and humane environment. Caroline had not only regained her dignity, but she had also inspired lasting change around her. That day, in the Golden Brew, life resumed its course with a newfound harmony. But for Caroline and Marcus, it wasn't just a return to normality, it was a new beginning, a promise that respect and dignity would always triumph, even in the face of arrogance and injustice. And so, mother and son, united by their courage and integrity, continued to build a place where every person felt valued, where every smile mattered, and where every act of respect had the power to transform lives.